Here we go. All right, ready to go?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. All right. Hey now, and how are you doing? Want to welcome you to the next episode of Peace, Love, and Bring Up Bat. Can't wait to talk to this gentleman. I was just talking to him in the green room, and this is going to be another amazing episode because this guy is fully heart-centered. His name is Jamal Cottrel, and he's into men's mental wellness. As we all know, mental wellness is so important, but he's a veteran. So we definitely want to say thank you, sir, for the service that you've given to us, and we're glad the blank check was not written. Uh, you know, uh, and he lives in San Antonio, so I got to talk to him. Because anybody who knows, I was born in San Antonio. I've been back, but he was actually stationed a while at Lackland. So how are you doing today, Jamal?
Hey, man, I'm doing great, Dave. I appreciate you having me on the show. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. We met through Elena, and give her a shout out. But I love talking about men's health because mental health because we all need it. We need, not only men, we need to check out our health as well. As anybody knows, my recent experiences have taught me that, but also our mental health is so strong, which will get us through some of those other mental health things. How'd you get involved in the mental wellness and mental health space?
Man, great question. As I was retiring, maybe about a year or two before I was going to retire, um, seeing a therapist was always taboo while being in the military.
Sure.
And so, as you're getting ready to retire, you're kind of getting your ducks in a row and getting in line to basically transition into civilian life. And I started taking some classes in preparation to get my degree, psychology courses that led to getting quite a few degrees in psychology. But I had an interest in it. It just intrigued me, and and so much so, I started to seek help myself. So I was starting to see a therapist for my PTSD as I was transitioning out, and so then we got to just talk about a few things and learn things about triggers and things that that can actually ignite you. Because being a man, you were told to kind of hold things in, and as you know, when holding things in, pressure busts pipes. Eventually, one small thing can set you off, and then you learn to what initiates that. And then once I learned that, I just had a hunger for more and just kept going and kept going.
That's excellent. Can we just ask about triggers? And I'm not asking you about any, I mean, share with whatever you want to share. But how can we identify triggers? I know when I started beginning my mental wellness journey, I didn't know what the triggers were, but a lot of people around me knew and were observant of that. So what would be something that be able to help us teach to somebody about identifying your triggers?
Yeah. So like a good example would be somebody that maybe has OCD and they freak out or they get frantic when things are not in order. And so that could be something that triggers them. Somebody that has an issue, not an issue, but say somebody doesn't put an item back in the same place every single time, and they live in the home with someone, and if they're watching that, or they're always on the lookout to see if those items are put back, if they're labeled face front, or whatever those things are, and those things can be triggers because if it's not, it causes the frustration, or it can cause an outburst depending on the level of communication that those two individuals have. And that's the important part, when dealing with triggers, is making sure that, the communication is there. So that way, one, you can communicate what triggers you. And then also, if the person triggers you, they have to be able to, be open to receiving, the feedback that, hey, what you did just kind of triggered me. Is there a way that we can possibly do that a different way? So they have to be, open minded.
Yeah, and how would you say, like for me, I wasn't aware. I don't want to, say I was stupid, but I was stupid. But no,
Okay.
I wasn't aware. I wasn't as self-aware as I am now to identify what my triggers were. Again, one of my triggers early on was if you pointed at me, man, we can go to blows. I'd get upset, and
Right.
I didn't know that. I was, from some of my upbringing. And then when I was talking to people, some of my closest friends, telling them, "Oh man, I went to therapy, and this is what they identified." They were like, "Yo, yeah, we knew." I'm like, "How? What's a way that you might talk about? How do you first become self-aware? Because if you don't think there's a problem, and the problem is always outside of us, the world becomes different. What's one way that you become more self-aware for yourself to notice the triggers initially?"
I would say you can self-evaluate because, as anything, if you want to progress or get forward in life, then you should be self-evaluating your the pros and cons of what you're doing, what's working, what's not working, and when you're doing that, another a way to go about documenting that is journaling. So if you're journaling, maybe talk about or think about how your day went at the end of the day, because some people in the morning they may say three positive affirmations to start their day off. Some people may say three positive affirmations at the end of the day, so that way that they can close out their day on a positive note. And within that time frame, if they're journaling throughout the day, and you can keep a documentation of what has happened throughout that day, if you go back and review those things, it's kind of like a log, and then you can see where you may have had an outburst or something someone did before that outburst, and you can identify, okay, Steve said this to me. I had an outburst an hour later, so something in between there. It kind of honed down on what happened. And then as you drill down on what happened, then you can identify, okay, that might be a problem right there. So the next time that happens, what some corrective actions or some steps that I can take if that also, because you know what pisses you off, right? I mean,
100%.
especially if it's a person. So it's we don't have to speak vaguely. You can identify something that somebody said or did, and it you don't like the way they look, or you don't like the way they say certain things. People have those triggers or those indicators. Once you figure out what that is, then now you can take a corrective course of action to say, all right, next time Steve does this, I'm going to make sure I don't reply so fast. Let me maybe count to 10, use the breathing mechanism to start to count backwards. That way you gather your thoughts before you reply. And then that way you can, say something that's probably more respectable than what you were going to initially say from that triggering moment.
No, 100%. Again, that's what that self-awareness really means is notice first what's triggering you. So, hey, man, Dave, this is what you're doing, and noticing that, or first Dave had to do that. I had to notice the things, everything was all reactive because of some of the environment that I grew up in. Uh,
Right.
but knowing what bothers me. So like even today, when I get upset today, I'm not only looking at somebody did something, the kids did this, that one did that. It's why am I upset about it? Now, if I'm upset because you spilled milk on my floor, yeah, I could be upset. Again, then we can relate and go, okay, how upset should you be? You should be like, all right, you got to go clean that up, versus screaming, yelling. It's a very simple example. So how, again, let's start with you, and then we're going to build it out to other
Okay.
people. But how did you do that for yourself? When did you start noticing, or was there a point in your life that you started noticing, hey, I got a problem here?
So here's one of the great things that happened with me is I took a disc assessment. And the disc assessment, it basically what it did is it taught me more about my personality and some of the, like the law of the mirror, law of attachments, and things of that nature. And because, like you mentioned earlier, based on your background or where you're from, you may be a little bit more aggressive. I'm in San Antonio. Somebody from Long Island, you might not be as welcome here in San Antonio.
In some areas, right? I grew up in Brooklyn, so like
right,
again, Brooklyn's a big place. There's some areas I was
exactly.
very welcomed in some areas I wasn't exactly the most welcome person.
Exactly, but just being in the South, the perception is the hospitality, the Southern hospitality, and those type of things. So that's one of those type of barriers. So by being in the military, going around different people, different ethnicities, and different folks, learning how to take a disc assessment and learning how you actually like to be communicated with, how you like to communicate with other people. This teaches you, again, about the different personalities. So not only the neighborhood, more like a combination of nature versus nurture, right?
Yeah.
So and that, so learning about myself and then learning about other people. That's what it's kind of like a cheat code, if you would say,
Yep.
because it's a cheat code for relationships and relationship building. So much of a cheat code that they have it for dating. One that's called the redisc. So basically, if you're in a relationship and how they may say, "Man, you act just like your mother's side of the family," or "You act just like," you know what I mean, things like that. So you can
Yep.
really break it down and
Yeah,
say, "Okay,
our language is very powerful.
exactly, exactly." So you can really break it down and say, "Okay, this is how." Okay, let's go more to introspective as far as for how we actually learn to communicate. So fast forwarding and using that tool and that mechanism as far as when engaging with other people, that's the best way to go about doing it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I agree with you, and to notice those things. I laughed when you mentioned about the disc program. I talk about it almost 3 years ago. Uh, Actually, almost 3 years ago to the day, I took my last disc, or at least the last one, the disc assessment, and it does change a little bit, especially as you grow and things like that. I was in corporate
Right.
America then, and when I took that disc assessment, so my whole department that we were there, it was over 100 people. Were all over to the left hand side, the D, and I was on the C side, which is more
Okay.
of the creative side, the thinking side, different type of thinking. And,
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
but it showed me how far away I was in my growth or where I was at that point to do it. And that's why whenever I talk about DISC, I think it's great. I think there's different ways to assess people, but when you start doing that, that's you also could it's a good thing and a bad thing. If I wasn't as strong in who I was, seeing myself completely away from the group, a department of over 100 people, you can definitely feel like, all right, but I knew that at that point I didn't belong in corporate America, and I wasn't about to do anything about it. And they eventually did, in terms of just a corporate restructure. So again, but it's good to know those things, those touchstones, and to know where you sit in the overall scheme of things, or again, what your likes are. Do you like do you like the Houston, Texans, or do you like or the Dallas Cowboys, right? Um, so those are two separate mindset
Right.
in team thinking, in even fan base.
Right.
So as you start becoming more aware of where do you align that much more. So how do you take from knowing your knowledge and start working with people in a community, in that larger picture?
J- just depending on which community. So, like in the actual community, so I'll say like working with youth and young adults. Working with youth and young adults is perfect because you already have that age gap.
Mhm.
So they they already think there's a difference in between. Oh man, you were born in the 1900s. Oh man, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So so it's really good to have it in that environment, so that way that you can break it down and use it to explain to them. Other environments, like you mentioned, corporate, it's good. So using the example that you use, with great power comes great responsibility, right? Because if you see somebody on the other end, you have to make sure that they're not using that as a way of taking away from the company, because some people they will use that as far as, so like you say, you can see likes and dislikes, but you want to look at it as strengths and ways to build with people. So that's kind of how I go about doing it, because nobody's perfect and nobody's going to be exactly the same. So when you're looking at that team and you're looking at, because who wants a team of everybody like them on it?
Yeah.
So again, looking at the team concept is you need one of each. You need an electrician, you need a plumber, you need utilities, carpenter. You know what I mean? You need everybody to make a team. So, and that's how I try to look at it, especially when you're in there talking to companies and individuals and people, because a lot of times too, again, just relationships. It doesn't matter if they're at home or in the boardroom. Uh, you just want to make sure that you're explaining the differences and that those aren't weaknesses. If they all sliders are all the way over to the left or to the right, you just want to identify, say, hey, what type of person are you looking for? More well balanced or with more single points of failure?
100%. I think that's the most important part is to identify what we need. And so how do you do that? Just as a coach, I want to talk a little bit about your coaching. Because I know, you also work try to separate ego from the growth. How do we do that?
Great question. Man, so we had a conversation, and a lot of the conversation was around feedback, and I don't know if feedback was a good word, but we use it a lot. Just communicating, and it seems there's definitely a lot of ego because you think about it, and we talk about we touch, just small on the narcissistic scale, but that's just something that's real big in America. Everybody wants to be the best at everything. Nobody wants to work in groups anymore. Everybody's more of that my, and I, frame of mind. Everybody has their own LLCs. You know what I mean? So everybody's doing their own thing. Everybody's online representing their own individual brand. And so that's in the case where we were talking about the ego, is because how can we come together if everybody's so busy trying to be a part? And so talking about, is it good to receive feedback? Some people say, hey, if I didn't ask you, why the hell are you telling me? You know what I mean? But what happens is sometimes if you're around somebody and they can't see a way forward, they keep banging their head on that wall, and you're the person who's supposed to be their accountability partner. How can you hold them accountable? If you don't say, "Hey, look, these are the areas that you're not doing well in." But people don't want to hear about how they're not doing well. They only want to hear about, you know, the
Right.
instant gratification and tell me the great shit that I'm doing. I don't care about nothing bad. So if you don't want to hear about anything bad, the growth, that's where the uncomfortable part comes into play. The discomfort, where you're supposed to figure out that growth.
Sure.
You're not figuring out the problem solving. So if you're not problem solving, you're not solving problems. So therefore, you're not figuring out how to move forward, but you're still complaining about the same situation over and over and over. So then, if you're not listening to that person that's next to you, then that's when you call me, the
Yep.
coach, because you take the personal out of it. You know what I mean? It's you take the and put the strategic and logic thinking into it, and then that way I can hold you accountable, and then you don't have to worry about it interfering with your relationships, meaning again business and personal. So that's why you call a coach to come in, and that way they can hold you accountable. They can put together the structure and the plan, and then that way you can move forward.
Yeah, no, 100%. Part of my story is one of my nicknames growing up. There was a song called Kid Ego by Extreme. I don't know if you ever heard that song. It's an old song,
No.
probably, but it was about, somebody who's loud, brash, and lived in his ego. It was all about him. And I admit I was Kid Ego. And then, didn't know really about growth. I thought I knew all the answers. I thought so much, but the answers is now I'm more. There's still times there's ego up there. There's times that I get up on a stage and bring it to the audience, and yeah, there's a little ego in it. Not that I bring it. I just love that attitude. That kid ego attitude. But I don't like what kid ego stood for at that time and in parts of my life. I now look to grow, and that's why I think as a speaker, and not I think I know as a speaker, I love pouring into my people in that, again, it's not my message, it's the message that is needed to be heard. How do you share that? Well, you have a podcast and, Silent No More. So I'm sure you're really well on the way to start passing out that message. Why is that message so important to you?
The, it's important because, like you just said, uh, identifying with the ego, but then realizing the ego is not a bad thing. You just have to know when to turn it on and turn it off, just like everything else.
Yeah.
When is it applicable? Should I be in this mode right now? Again, going back to self-evaluating and observing that, okay, I might be at a heightened state of than I need to be at this particular moment. Let me, ease up off the throttle and calm back down. That's not necessary at the time, and being coachable. That's the most important thing. So seeing a lot of people out there with potential, but self sabotage getting in the way. And so my thing is, I've always wanted, and when I didn't know and I didn't have the information, I always wanted it, and I was always hungry for it. I just didn't have anybody to give it to me, or wanted to, or then they wanted to charge me for it, whichever the case may be. But now having it and having so much of it is, and then the passion to want to help and share and help people grow. Um, that's why I do what I do. But then everybody's not receptive of it, so that's what I have to realize also, and that was the difficult part in it. And so once I learned that everybody didn't want that information, everybody didn't want help, then I realized, okay, this is why people charge for it.
Yep.
And so then I went and started a business, and then restructured it, recalibrated it, and then found a better way to deliver the message. And that's what the platform is going to be.
Yeah, I love that you said recalibrated. I have a thing called, the R in your heart, where I use a lot of R words, and I've given speeches on that. And I love using the word recalibrate because we always have to fine tune. I mean, think about it as you keep growing, as we're talking about growth, that regrowing and is a calibration of who we are. I mean, I'm embarrassed by some of the things I did in my past because they were stupid stuff. But at the end of the day, I learned, and I'm not stupid. You need to learn from your mistakes. Now, I'm sure, and you don't have to share anything personal if you don't want to. What has made you learn some of the things that you did?
Man, every day, I learn every day. Um, if I'm speaking to someone and I may feel like we got a good dynamic or rapport, and if I went too far on a joke and they didn't like it, I just learned something from it. You know what I mean? What was happening before that I probably could have saw that and pivoted and went a different direction. Could have maybe stopped joking a little bit earlier. Um, I learned going to the grocery store. Walking past somebody, you speak to them, and they don't speak back. Their chins in their chest, heads down 45 degrees, and they're looking at their phone. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Don't get
100%.
pissed off. I just learned to accept it, and still continue to be me. Speak, smile, and if they don't do it, don't take it personal. Um, I, I guess it's a new version of these NPCs that they're calling people nowadays. So, but yeah, just I learn every day, man, and I think if you're not learning every day, you're not growing, and then you're not open. Because if you're not open, you're closed minded, then that's probably the only way that you won't learn and you won't grow.
Yeah, 100%. Growth always leads to learning. And, that's why I remember growing up and somebody was talking to me about investing. And the gentleman was in his 80s at that time. And he goes, yeah, I'm still aggressive now. He goes, and I'll tell you why. He goes, because I'm keep learning and I make smart decisions generally. But if I don't, I learn something different. And the reason why I'm so aggressive, with his investing, is he goes, why wouldn't I want more money? If I'm going to live, I don't know how long I have, and
Right.
why wouldn't I want more? And why wouldn't you want more learning? What is something that we can learn? So I have a section in my podcast where I say, let's walk into the magic garden, and I want you, Jamal, to plant a seed in the garden, something that somebody might need to grow from. They might, a tool, a resource, or something that you think, an idea that they could grow just by hearing it from you.
I would say what I would say is give yourself more grace.
Mm,
A lot of times, again, we think back and we reflect, and if I would have, I should have, and then just if you're going to reflect, just look at the situation and just learn from it, and then move forward.
100.
Because again, that goes back to the self-sabotage. Because now you're going back and that's not what you went back there to do. You either went back to see what did I do that was successful, and how can I replicate it, or what did I do where I wasn't successful,
Mm,
and I should have pivoted. I should have zigged and I should have zagged. Because 9 times out of 10, it was probably a good idea. It was just probably poor execution. And then think about who you were in the room with. If you were the smartest person in the room, get your ass out of that room and go find another room to be in. And then that way you can ask questions, and everybody's not asking you questions. You know what I mean? If that makes sense.
100%. I think there's so much power in not being the smartest guy in the room and not being the dumbest, but
Right.
And dumb is just because you don't have the right information, right? I've
Right.
walked into the room where I have been the dumbest person in the world in that room, and then by the time I walked out, I didn't allow that to be the same case. Now that didn't mean I became smarter than somebody else. I just learned something. Try to step in the room. But I love that. Give yourself the grace.
Yeah.
That's a really powerful part of doing something because a lot of us beat ourselves up.
Yeah.
I beat myself up even now over some of the things I did in my past, and I'm like, you are a dumbass. And
Right.
I was, but I also grew from it. That's why I always say, if you met me only a year ago, you don't know who I am today. You met me 5 years ago, you definitely don't know who I am. And
Right.
we can go further back. I mean, I have friends that I
Right.
know for many years, and they're like, "Man, you are not the guy I grew up with." He goes, "Where is that guy?" And then I
Right.
do something stupid, and then they're like, "Oh, he's there."
Yeah.
But there is that learning. There's that silliness and things like that that we do. It's that age earned knowledge.
Yeah, I think it's all subjective, right? Because you just said like, yeah, I was a dumbass, but then you can think back and be like, oh, remember when we did this? And you might think it was the coolest thing, but you were
Yep.
really still a dumbass. So again, it's just being subjective of the memories that you have. So that's why I say it's great to have them, but don't place anything on them. Reflect on it, and that's just it. Just leave it at that because at the end of the day, it really has no bearing or any weight on you unless you know, give it that power. So
Yep.
again, it just goes back to giving yourself some grace, man.
No, 100%. I agree. Now, so where can everybody find you? I know you've had some great knowledge, and I want to make sure that everybody has the ability to contact you and reach out to you. What is the best way that they can reach out to you?
Man, I got the website. It's REAL or live.org, realorlive.org, or they can contact me on Facebook, Limitless Leads Coaching.
Hmm.
And then I'm on I'm on Instagram. I don't use it that much. It's Trailblaze, TRELLBLAHZE, Trailblaze.
Yeah, nice. Okay. Now, so is there anything else that you'd like to leave us? I try to give it about a half hour. I mean, we have a lot longer, but I want to be respectful of your time. Is there anything you'd like to know about you and what type of advice you can give the world?
No, just like everybody tune in to Silent No More on the Prospera TV network. Definitely looking to talk more and have you on there to talk more about men's health and how we can make a difference.
How can they find the Prosperity Network?
Prosperity, it's on Roku, and then you can also look it up on YouTube as well.
Okay, so we should look for the Prosperity Network, and of course, Silent No More with Jamal Cottrell.
Yeah,
All right,
absolutely.
man, that's awesome, man. I really love it. I really appreciate your time and your effort, and I'd love to be on your show whenever you have an open slot. I love talking about mental health and how we rise from that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And hopefully we can put a panel together one day too, and go back and forth. That'd be great.
Yeah, no, awesome.
Okay. Hey, appreciate you, man.
Okay, thanks. And thanks for everybody else for just tuning in to Peace, Love, and Bring a Bat. And remember, always put peace and love in your life. And then when you bring a bat, it's about bringing awesome thoughts. And I wish you all to hit the sweet spot. Thank you so much.